2020. I guess it feels not as long as it feels like it is. Hey, welcome back to the channel. All right, continuing on. This is going to be our third class covered and our top 10 in each class. As you know, I've been putting this up on my Discord server. People who've earned these honorary roles, unique roles, those sorts of things are actually allowed to add on their own champions that they suggest. It's been really fun. And then literally anyone on the server can vote. And it has provided a lot of insights. I think I've learned a lot on who the community is using, how they're using them, and there was absolutely no format. This isn't best for BGs or war or questing or incursions or whatever. This is just the best. And then I will also give my thoughts on my top 10 as we go through this, but this will be led by my Discord server. This has been a tremendous amount of fun. Make sure you catch all of them because we will continue to do all of them. And there's going to be a couple other really fun top 10s as we get later in the year. Now, I want to give a shout out to the honorable mention champions. This is my server's honorable mentions. I'll talk about my own as we go. The first one that just stands out to me is Mojo. We're going to talk about Mojo later. Trust me on this one. OG Scarlet Witch, obviously synergized up. That makes a lot of sense. We're seeing that. That's very cool. Sorcerer Supreme. That one almost hurt me a little bit, but I couldn't argue. I think she's just, somehow this is the evolving relationships we talk about quite a bit in this game and on my stuff. Magic. Magic is what has made me realize we're just going to remove her and Quake. I mean, the server can vote for them. If they come up, I will talk about it, but I'm going to remove them from my own personal rankings because they're only available as 5 stars. Yes, there is Ascension coming into the game, but we don't know exactly how that's going to work. So I'd rather just kind of remove them from the group. We'll talk about them briefly. She's incredible. She's powerful. Well, I haven't used her in war in quite a while, and I think that's part of this here. She's not going to show up in my own list, but her and Quake are going to be kind of grouped that way. We're going to acknowledge that they exist, but they're not going to make the list. Symbiote Supreme, phenomenal. I think this is showing how strong the Mystic class is. And then, of course, we've got Jane, the Mighty Thor, America Chavez. Let's see what that buff does. She can be good in these uses, but she's ultra, ultra, ultra niche, and even then sometimes she's disappointing. Spidey Supreme. We may see him when we do this in, I think it's going to be June of 2023. We may see him up there. He seems well situated for that evolving relationship between Cosmics and Mystics. It feels like they want us to be able to do things with some Mystics that does not evolve, neutralize, or nullify. He seems to fit that really, really well. Keep an eye on him. Ebony Maw. It's a nice buff. You know, I like him. Good defender, too. So if you're doing Battlegrounds or you want to place on war defense, it makes a lot of sense. And then Dragon Man. That one hurt a little bit because, you know, I love Dragon Man. I absolutely love Dragon Man. And yet, he's not going to make my top 10 either. Okay, the number 10 champion is actually going to be LONGSHOT. To me, he feels a lot older in this game than he actually is. But in a way, he's almost like a precursor or whatever you want to call it, a shout out to, I think, something I've been talking about more and more in this game is like, we're getting away from niche, we're getting away from these general dominate everythings and moving more towards these specialists. And he can do that. If there's a lot of buffs and you can nullify them, he's phenomenal. And sometimes there's almost no one better. Yeah, you obviously do want to be able to parry. You know, he's got a nice reach on his heavy though. I like playing him. I think this is a good, smart ranking for him. And then there's a bit of a tier here with him. Now, that he's part of, and we'll talk about that as we go. Now, my own number 10, though, is Juggernaut. I really want to learn to play this champion more, doing so many Battlegrounds tournaments as far as like watching them, doing the commentating on them. I'm seeing him being used phenomenally. Aiden helped us out with that, then Fintech, and then, of course, Suida as well, and so many other players are using him in matchups that aren't like these super ultra hard counters. And so I don't know if I'm going to classify him as a specialist or one of these just general kind of really awesome champions. He's obviously nowhere near as good as he used to be on defense, but this is a game that we play offensively more than anything else. It's really only Alliance War where that comes up, and that's only 5 champions. And then again on Battlegrounds, but there's a lot to that guy's kit. There seems to be modes that we're enjoying or having fun with. He's exceptional for. Moving on to number 9, we have the Sigil Witch. There's a lot of mixed feelings with her, right? Like, the only way you can get her is if you spend money on the game, but I think we've come to accept that she is a quality champion. She is in the game, and a lot of people have bought the sigil. So this isn't the time for the debate on that. The fact of the matter is she is very powerful. Again, dealing with buffs in her own unique way, right? There's a lot of the nullification, then adding, and these sorts of things. One of the big kind of like negatives to her was this fact that the champion can go unblockable being the defender, but it feels like a lot of people have learned how to handle that. I think they did a great job of putting the spirit of the comic book character into her. There is a bit of chaos. It can get a bit chaotic watching those fights, but players like Sam, Super Sam from my own Alliance for Loki has been showing us how great she is. And then I think, again, in Battlegrounds, we're seeing how she can absolutely dominate some fights. I kind of wish I had one when I was going up against Steve's Nova the other day. So this is really no surprise. I do like her, and she's part of some really nice synergy teams as well. And then as far as my own personal number 9, I actually list her too. As far as just like the best cosmic champion, she does so much that I think what you want a cosmic champion to do. She's very powerful. You can go to the SP3. Sweeta was showing us that when she was pretty newly in the game, taking down Alliance War bosses and things like that. She's very, very powerful. But I'm not going to recommend to people to go out and get the sigil just so that they can get her. I think you can make your way through this game without having her, and that's a good thing. Moving on to the number 8 ranking from my server is actually Juggernaut, and he's the end of this tier. There wasn't massive gaps between him, Scarlet Witch, and Longshot, and then also some of the honorable mention champions, but he did come up there. He's number 10 in my own. We've already talked about him. The one thing I'll mention is, one of the things we talk about in these evolving relationships is that Nullify is becoming a thing, and then I know I talked about Spider-Man a little bit with, hey, they want us to be able to do something with Cosmics when we can't nullify and we can't use neutralize. But that doesn't mean nullify is bad. It just means that it's not the only thing that Mystics do anymore. And he does have it off his signature ability. I'm showing that using him in Battlegrounds, I actually found, I get my Unstoppable up and he does his job. It's been really cool. And I'm looking forward to exploring this champion much, much more. My own number 8 champion is actually WICCAN. He's going to come up later. I'm very surprised by it, and we'll talk about it and what my server did with WICCAN when it's time to talk about him in the server rankings. Okay, number 7 in my server rankings was actually Diablo. Now, there was a large tier jump, and I think that's important to keep in mind because my rankings are going to start to diverge quite a bit from the servers. But the fact is the tiers are pretty much the same. And I think that's important to keep in mind here, right? Because so much just comes down to individuals' experience. Diablo's phenomenal. I mean, he's one of those champions where I tested on stream and I was like, I kind of barely scratching the surface of what I can do with this guy. And I think at the time, rank 3s were the big deal. And I immediately took him to rank 3, did some phenomenal things in war, was really early on and just noticing how great this guy's buff was. J-Nick was on it, telling us how great he was. We had a lot of fun with this, with the emojis, and like I said, an Alliance War, and he's phenomenal. And one of the things I really tried to get through to people was like, I don't think you have to run Mystic Dispersion. I don't think you have to run Recoil. Running at least one of those is very, very helpful, though. And if you can run both, he is amazing. He's going to end up a lot higher in my own tier, and we will talk about that. But again, one of the things I really want to get through to people is I don't think you have to run Recoil and Mystic Dispersion, but they are very helpful. At least having one of them will allow you to play him in a different style or way. I really liked Mystic Dispersion for him. Used him a ton, though, without the Recoil tree, and was extremely happy with the results. I think he's a little low on my server rankings, but like I said, it's tiers, and you're going to see where I end up putting him. As far as my own number 7, I have Mojo. And again, I really am diverging from my server on this one. But again, I think part of that's, again, individual experience, and then also I like to look at these relationships and how they're evolving. One of the things that we used to want out of Mystic champions was nullify. I want them to nullify, and the Cosmic champions, we need their buffs to be nullified. But the game has to evolve. It makes sense, and I actually like what Kabam is doing. It's very cool. And these relationships are evolving, so then we started getting neutralized champions, right? With Tigra, Rintra, these sorts of things. We'll talk about them later. And now we're starting to get nodes and things like that, and there's starting to be champions where neutralize isn't going to be allowed, or it's not going to work, or these sorts of things. And so there's this nice class. You can tell they started trying to do it with America Chavez. Now Spidey Supreme is coming to the game. There's someone else who I can't think of. But they're not getting rid of the buff. I think it's Wong. but they're getting more powerful from these buffs, right? Mojo fits this really beautiful sweet spot where he's not removing the buffs. He's not necessarily getting more powerful. What he's doing is he's shortening them. And when he came into the game, I don't think we saw, there wasn't enough spaces for that to be this really desirable thing. My buddy Spinnaker3 put out some great videos showing us how cool it could be and some war fights and things like that. But as this relationship between Cosmic and Mystic continues to evolve, right now, to the best of my knowledge, I could be wrong if I am, pointed out, Mojo's the only one doing this. He's the only one that doesn't need to nullify. He's the only one who doesn't need to neutralize. Now the buff does need to be one that can expire. So there's also that, but we're seeing this more and more. Neutralize, they're starting to find ways to counter that. They're finding ways to counter nullifies. Mojo is unique. And so if I'm just giving the best and, you know, and helping you build your roster, your deck or whatever, Mojo's, don't sleep on Mojo. I could see him being more powerful. And honestly, I will not be shocked. In fact, I would personally like it if in 2023, we see some Mystic champions that come into the game that function similarly to Mojo in regard to how they work with buffs. They don't nullify them, they don't neutralize them, but they get rid of them super, super fast. Okay, number 6 on my server's rankings was actually Clairvoyant. I was a little surprised by this one too. But again, I'm not going to belabor the point. A lot of it is tiers. I'm purposely scrolling down here. I want to talk to you because for me, this is the thing. This is the thing. This SP2, 100% chance to inflict the opponent with buff immunity for 10 seconds. This is a big deal. It's helping her still stay very, very relevant, right? Folks are taking Hulkling, who is a complete menace. I hate to say I told you so, but I did. I did. Early on that one, I'm going to take my victories. I'm going to take my wins where I can get them. I was early in telling everyone he's going to be a problem. Offensively and defensively, he's phenomenal, and he is. That's not the only reason this buff immunity is a big deal, but it is, and I think it's going to keep her relevant for a very, very long time. DLL has been on there telling us she doesn't need to run recoil. Yes, you do want Mystic Dispersion. If you run the recoil, some things about her are going to be significantly enhanced, and if you don't, you still have a phenomenal champion. And in some ways, and the guy knows what he's talking about. She has other things that are significantly enhanced. She's phenomenal. She's great. I think if she's someone you pull early, I think you're very excited about, and she's going to carry you through a ton in this game. And I don't think, you know, I see 2019. I don't see her slowing down. I just see the game evolving. She was one of those champions that could do everything. She was phenomenal. There was a point in time where there was a very vocal group of people in the community who felt she was maybe even better than Doom. And as this game continues to evolve, I don't think it's that she's less powerful. I just think there's new challenges that she does not handle as well as some other champions have come into the game, but she is still incredibly strong, and I would still put her as a great generalist, and she's nowhere near niche, in my opinion. So I don't want to be misleading with that whole buff immunity thing. And then as far as my number 6 champion, I have the Hood. I have the Hood. I really love this buff. I'm glad they went and took the time to really get it right. And we'll talk about the Hood because we're going to see him a little bit later in the server rankings. Number 5 champion, according to my server, is the Hood. Now, there was a bit of a mini tier jump here. It was nowhere near as drastic as the last one we talked about, but there was a jump between the Hood and Clairvoyant. He's phenomenal. He's great. Another champion I went on, I was like, this guy is good. This guy is really, really good. I was not skilled enough to show it to you in War, and I wish I had been, right? I would show my War planners what I thought he could do, and it's fine. I respect that, but they were like, not so much, Vega. But now players like Super Sam, he's coming up a lot in these Mystic champions, have been showing us how phenomenal he can be. I believe Panda Man Pete was using him really well. And then we're seeing him also used in Battlegrounds. Just the fact that he can explode with that heavy, right? All the big damage. DLL has really been talking to us about, like, you don't need to mix up a ton of mystical charge. There's no big benefit to getting 20 at a time. If you get 10 and then you get 10 later, it's still the same thing. The miss mechanic, anytime you can create openings, we talked about this with Ghost quite a bit, but the miss mechanic, create your own openings without having to stun or backdraft, intercept, or anything like that's phenomenal. And then his awakened ability there, right? Just from SIG level 1, you become immune to all stun effects while invisible. This is really good. I know I did some videos on this showing you with like encroaching stun and things like that. And it's, to the best of my knowledge, I know that sometimes he gets a little bit bugged, and his first miss actually doesn't miss, which is incredibly frustrating because that's one of the big advantages of him is being able to create these openings, and that gets bugged. My understanding is that's going to be fixed with the next patch, so hopefully that happens. He's great. He's phenomenal. I used to think you had to run him with that synergy that replenishes his bullets. It's with Mole Man and a couple other champions. I can't think who they are off the top of my head, but if you take him into the right matchups where you're getting rid of a lot of buffs, right, with his SP2 and the Fate Seal and the whole thing, you can actually have bullet management that's pretty good. I don't know if I would want to take him into a lengthy quest, relying on him to do every single fight, unless there was just a ton of buffs or I had that synergy. But as this game continues to grow and we get more nodes and war and battlegrounds, it's really not a big deal. He's phenomenal. He's great. I really agree with my server. I had him at 6. They had him at 5. What's the difference? Does it really matter? And then my own number 5 champion was Clairvoyant. And for me, that's just because I love Hood. I do, and I think he's phenomenal. I don't think he's a luxury rank. I wouldn't put him in that category. But if I'm giving advice to someone and they're coming up and they're like, hey, Hood, Clairvoyant, I think I'm going to ask them, do you have any of these other champions? If they don't, then I'd probably go with Clairvoyant just because I think she's going to carry you through so much. She's so incredibly versatile. But we're splitting hairs at this point. Okay, the number 4 champion, Mystic champion, according to my server, is Wiccan. Now, I love Wiccan. You know that. If you've been watching my channel at all the last 4 or 5 months, I even did, I did my essentials video on him very early, like a CCP video. I was on vacation with my family. I was like, I like this champion so much. And I think there's going to be scenarios where he is just dominant. He's going to be eye-popping. In fact, in there, I talked about how the YouTuber in me wanted to give you this kind of, not misleading, but very eye-catching title and thumbnail. But I was like, but it's a bit misleading because it appears as though he can always do that, but then I decided not to do it. That's the point. He is phenomenal. You've been watching me use him in war this year, and I've been showing you guys, like, in these matchups, he's taking out Hulklings. He's there's buffs, and they can be neutralized. He's phenomenal. Null war bosses, right? I think I soloed 5 this season. He can block unblockable attacks from cosmic champions. There's, sometimes there's these champions where it feels like they just wanted to give them a ton of utility and they just threw it in. This is how I kind of classify Cap Sam. Can't stand playing him. I personally don't think Cap Sam's flow is very good. Some people love him. That's fine. Wiccan has these little nuggets of utility that were just thrown in, but I feel like the flow is excellent. When you want them or how you want them, you can access them, right? You want his resistance up, you back up, you hold block a little bit, and then fights where you really need it, like that one against Null, there's opportunities that just present themselves for you to do that. Getting up his neutralize, you just end in the light, and then you can extend it by triggering his other spells. I think this is a phenomenally well-made champion, and I think he's dominant in scenarios that Kabam is currently throwing at us that are very difficult. So I can see why my server has him rated so incredibly high. Personally, I had him at 8. Maybe I'm being a little conservative. Maybe my server knows where 2023 is heading, but I think they're telling us there's problems that Kabam is throwing at me right now, and Wiccan's handling them, which makes them incredibly valuable. The server's got him at 4. I've got him at 8. Ultimately, is it important? No, but it is fun to talk about. I hope that when 2023 comes along, maybe I've got Wiccan even higher. I love him. I do. Let's just kind of leave it at that. Number 4 champion for me is Diablo. And I told you, when we talked about Diablo, so I'm not going to go over it too much, but you can run Recoil, you cannot. You can run Mystic Dispersion, you cannot. I think you want to at least be running one of them. I love him with Recoil. Also, I like champions that allow me to make a mistake and still heal up. And he is definitely one of them. I love Diablo. He's phenomenal. I really have him at 4, and I feel strongly about that. But we can all agree to disagree. Okay, the number 3 champion is Rintra, and I think it's incredibly important to let you all know and to make it clear, there was a massive tier jump, a big one. I think on a relative basis, even bigger than the previous tier jump that we had between Diablo and Juggernaut. And definitely much larger than the one we had between the Hood and Clairvoyant. The 1, 2, and 3 is incredibly close in a way, and I'll explain that. Rintra and the number 2 champion were 1 vote apart. When there's this many votes, that is basically means literally nothing. Unsurprisingly, they both dual neutralize. We've been talking about that for a very long time on this channel, that this relationship between Cosmics and Mystics is evolving. Neutralize is incredibly important. Now, you're often wanting to neutralize Cosmic Champions, and we're going to go ahead and take this down here. This is the part where it's at. Yeah. And this is one of the reasons I love Rintra, right? And it's just, this is a part of his kit. And I think many people like, this isn't the eye-popping thing, those big, massive SB2s and getting the ruptures off and getting yourself rooted, and he's so tanky. That's all still there. But here's why I know I wanted him early, and I used it a ton in war. I showed it to you time and time again, and then I just stopped showing it because I'm like, y'all get the picture. I don't need to keep showing you these videos. But whenever either champion lands a hit, Rintra has a 6% chance to inflict a non-stacking passive neutralize. Cool, right? Of 100% potency for 3 seconds. Great, that sounds really good. But it's only 60% of the time. It's for 3 seconds. Okay, that's fine. It's good. If the opponent is Cosmic or superior, inflict neutralize of 200% potency, helping you get around some of those nodes that are starting to dig into the effectiveness of neutralize, right? Like the 100% ability accuracy, whatever. This is 200%. And it now lasts for 5 seconds. This is the reason why my battle group kept throwing me or putting me into these incredibly annoying fights against conduit champions that were Cosmic, like Gallon. And I just needed to keep up the neutralize. It is so incredibly powerful. I know that some folks don't love his signature ability for things like Battlegrounds. I do get it because they feel like they're getting their power too much and they're getting forced to the SB3. But the fact is the SB3 has a nice effect, that nice little heal. Or you could just throw your SP1s. I know I keep saying I'm eventually going to get an Essentials video on Rintra. It's just been a matter of time, but I think the community is really understanding how to play him. I love this champion, and splitting between him and the number 2 champion was just, it comes down to taste. It really does come down to taste. My own personal number 3 was actually Tigra, who we're going to talk about in a few seconds here. All right, now the server had Tigra as the number 2 champion. Again, by 1 point, right? You get this signature ability going up. You're going to be able to keep your senses going. And a lot of fights like War and Battlegrounds, you're ending these fights, especially if you start off with them. You're ending these fights if you've played well and it's a good matchup before they even have a chance to fall off. So many amazing channels, FinTech, DLL, Doc have been showing us Tigra for a very long time. Now she's got a whole new mode to stay extremely relevant, and it doesn't accentuate, but it gives a platform to show how powerful she is in these smaller health pool fights, right? And then phenomenal players, I'm sure, are using her in longer form things. I'm not like Abyss, but you know, like Grandmaster's Gauntlet and what have you. She's great. She's phenomenal. She's got a bit of a miss mechanic too, right? I love her. She's great. If you put in the time to learn the spacing with her and the defenders, you're going to dominate a tremendous amount of fights. So she's a bit high maintenance in that way. And I think that's ultimately the thing with her and Rintra. If you want the big tanky cow, you go with Rintra. If you want the feline that is nimble, quick, not risky if you know what you're doing, but if you make a mistake, you're going to get punished badly, probably not going to survive it. You go with Tigra. And she has phenomenal burst damage in a class that doesn't have a lot of it. I really like her. If you came to me and asked me, you know, Rintra or Tigra, I'd probably start asking questions about, do you enjoy playing Tigra? Do you put the time into learning her? Are you ready to commit to that? Then I'd probably lean towards Tigra. If you're like, it's not so much fun, I don't know, I'm not that kind of player, I'd go Rintra, and I use Rintra all the time in AQ. He saves me so many items, so big, so tanky. I think these two are in their own tier as far as 2 and 3, and I think the difference between them is so much about just personal preference. They are very different in some ways, and as far as how you play them, and it fits the personality and what they're trying to put into the champions. But ultimately, they both are a bit of a nuke. They can do some significant damage, and they both work with neutralize. And then I think, to the surprise of very few people, I know some people will disagree, and that's fine. But to the surprise of very few people, number 1 is Doom. Doom is my number 1. Doom is the server's number 1. And, you know, we've only done 3 classes so far, but this was the only one that just had a for sure dominant number 1. He received by far the most first point votes that any champion has received yet so far. And I have a feeling it might stay that way. We'll see. I have a feeling Science might get there, but we'll find out later as we go. But Doom's phenomenal. He's great. So many people call him overpowered, overtuned. The stats, you know, we enjoy it when we're using him offensively, but then when we actually have to fight a Doom and the crit resistance and the block penetration start to come in, and we're like, maybe he's a little too overpowered. But he's phenomenal. He's great. I know there's thoughts on like, well, maybe Tiger's better, or maybe Clairvoyant's better, or maybe Rintrah's better. And the thing is Doom doesn't have Neutralize, but it's not like you now have to have Neutralize for every fight. All of those Nullify fights are still up. And here's the wild thing is folks are still using him to beat champions like Hulkling and Gallon and what have you. So he's got that much in his kit where maybe you can't play him in his most ideal way, but he can still find ways to get it done. And then that still leaves all of these other fights where he's just dominant. He's tanky. He just doesn't heal. I think that's the biggest negative you can say about him. But he's phenomenal. He's got an incredible buff and power control. He's got it all. He's got it all. I do not see him slowing down. The worst thing I could possibly say is that as the game continues to evolve, there may be more situations where you want Neutralize. We've talked about that a lot. And there may end up being situations where there's this new thing that I feel like I'm seeing happening. I talked to you about it with Spidey Supreme and now Mojo, where maybe they are superior to Doom in those specific matchups, but that's not really Doom slowing down. That's just the game expanding. As of right now, I feel very confident that Doom will still be the #1 champion when we do this again in 6 months. And if I had to bet, he'd still be there a year from now, even though this guy came out in 2019. Let me know what you think we got right. Let me know what you think we got wrong. I do try my best to read all the comments. I try to respond to as much as I can, but as the channel grows, it is getting a little bit more difficult. But I will tell you, I'm much more likely to respond to the comments. If they're constructive criticism, that's great. Those of you who do it, I respond. But if you're just coming to be angry, it's probably not going to get a response from me. But if you have a real feeling, a strong feeling, let me know. That's cool. That's part of what this is. It's to educate, to have fun, and also to have a little bit of a debate. We don't need to agree, and that's all okay. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all are having a great December. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.
I hope you either learned something, were entertained, or even better, a little bit of both. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.